Chairman, good afternoon.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy Veterans Day, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you who have served.
For those of you that don't know, in Chairman Banks' life, we're celebrating something else. He's been readmitted to the public square. He's allowed to tweet again. Welcome back.
Good to be back.
Can you tell us what happened?
Well, Tommy, it reminds me, a couple of years ago, true story, my dad got kicked off Facebook. And I remember when it happened, I thought, oh my God, Dad, I'm a congressman. You're going to embarrass me. I remember calling him, and he's like, I'm sorry, son, I won't do it again. I don't even know what he did. And here about a month ago, I got kicked off of Twitter. My dad calls me Jimmy. He called me and said, Jimmy, I'm so proud of you. But in my case, I tweeted a fact, a biological fact, and context is everything, right? In my case, it was about a month ago that Rachel Levine, the Undersecretary of HHS, was inaugurated as the first four-star transgender admiral in the Public Health Corps. The Surgeon General of the United States was on hand, and he tweeted, I'm very proud to be present for the swearing in of the first female four-star admiral. I don't know about all of you, but that's greatly offensive to me that you can call someone who lived 54 years of their life as a biological man the first female anything, right? I'm the father of three daughters, 12, 10, and 8, and they're here. They're just not here. They're at the pool. I asked them if they wanted to come and hear me speak. They said no. And my wife said no thanks, but she can't wait to hear Governor DeSantis, right? By the way, I'm from a red state. I wish my governor had half the backbone as Governor DeSantis. But Tommy, as a girl dad, I mean, this is deeply offensive to me. So I called it out on Twitter. I tweeted first a fact. I said I tweeted the title of first female admiral goes to a man. First female four-star admiral goes to a man. Period. Tweet. I've been accused of being edgy before, but I didn't think this was particularly an edgy tweet. Then I followed that up with a second tweet, and I said this is offensive to girls all over America, like my daughters, who my wife and I are raising in this great country with the hope that one day that they might break glass ceilings. You can't take the title of first female anything away from my three daughters if you've lived 54 years of your life as a biological man. You just can't do it. That's not okay with me. I woke up a couple of days later, and my Twitter account was locked with a message from Twitter saying, since you've engaged in hateful conduct by misgendering somebody, you've lost access to your account until you delete your tweet. So we went through back and forth with Twitter for a few weeks and appealed it, and they came back time and again and determined that they said they weren't going to give me my account back. So what I did was I have another account, my personal account, so I started tweeting it from my other account, and my followers exponentially grew. Here's a little known fact. How many of you knew that Rachel Levine played high school football with General Milley, the highest ranking officer in the entire, did you guys know this? This is true. Rachel Levine played high school football with General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So how dare you take away the title of first female anything away from little girls like my daughters in this great country. So that's what I did, guilty as charged. I'm not going to apologize for it. It turns out there's another really famous guy who's kicked off Twitter.
That's right. That's right.
And these days, I've never told anybody this, but over the last few months, he and I have developed a Penpal relationship. No joke. He sends me, the President Trump is going to talk about, President Trump sees things that we're doing at Republican Study Committee, or sees me in the news, and since he can't tweet, he writes me handwritten notes. I mean, how novel. And I got one of my favorite ones I've ever got last week. They show up about once a week, FedEx packages. If you ever come to my office on Capitol Hill, I'll show you. I've got them, like a dozen of them hung up on my wall. They're just like articles where he writes, "Good job, Jim," or, "Keep fighting," nice, encouraging notes. But he saw that I was tangling with General Milley before the Armed Services Committee a few weeks ago, and he wrote in big letters, "Bad general, he's such a loser." I thought I can't agree more, President Trump. So with my time off at Twitter, I'm engaging a little more handwriting and handwritten notes and whatnot.
Well, you can't call it snail mail because it's not the Postal Service, it's FedEx.
That's right.
And I love the image of President Trump at Mar-a-Lago penning notes and sending them overnight to you in FedEx envelope.
Take 'em.
Folks, if you're not aware, Twitter is not this highly patrolled, pristine environment. What Twitter allows on their pages, it's vile. It is terrorist leaders, foreign leaders who actually do incite violence, pornography, all kinds of terrible things are on Twitter. But what they can't tolerate is a United States congressman telling the truth. That's where we are today. They are using their seat of power, and there's no other way to explain it. They have power and control over that part of our public square. They're doing it for political reasons, and it's having political outcomes. Obviously, they singled you out for your politics, and because you're impactful, they don't boo nobodies, as we say. But big tech is out of control. What can we do? What laws need to change to hold them accountable, and to make sure that all of us have the ability to speak in these public places?
Yeah, this is really important. And as the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, the largest conservative caucus on Capitol Hill, 158 out of 212 Republicans are a member of our caucus. We've been having this conversation since the first day of the year when I took over as chairman. Where do we go from here to hold big tech accountable for censorship of conservatives, for what they did to alter the outcome of the election in 2020, and overall what they're doing to change our American way of life? But this is a tough conversation. It's been a tough conversation for groups like the Heritage Foundation, who's been on the front lines of figuring this out. But my situation, being placed in Twitter jail for tweeting a fact, was a wake-up call for a lot of my colleagues. So if there's anything good that comes out of it, it's that. And I appreciate the outpouring of support that I received from dozens of my colleagues, from the Heritage Foundation, from so many others who spoke out in support of me while I was in Twitter jail. But all of this leads to a much more significant place, and that's what does the legislative solution look like to hold big tech accountable? I read a book. It's a massive book written by a true Marxist. Her name is Shoshana Zuboff. Some of you might have heard of her because she appeared in a Netflix documentary on this subject, and it was like 1,000 pages long. I don't recommend reading it. It took me a long time to read it, but skim it. But there was a part of it, Tommy, that really stuck out to me. She used the term herding. Herding is in herding animals, Herding. And she talked about how these big tech companies are herding our consumer behavior. They're also herding our political behavior, our voting behavior, and how that is changing fundamentally how we live out our lives on a daily basis is dangerous. So this gets into a larger question about how we crack up big tech and using antitrust laws. So that's one solution that's on the table. You've all heard about the arguments over Section 230. Do we repeal Section 230? Do we rewrite Section 230? All of these conversations are what we are having internally at Republican Study Committee. We've probably spit out 25 bills at this point among Republicans, and we're trying to figure it out. And is there bipartisan support for some of the avenues that some of the legislative ideas that we've come up to hold them accountable to? I think that there is. So that's the good news. The bad news is this: the top 5 donors to Joe Biden for president were big tech Silicon Valley executives. So think about that for a minute. They are on their side. The big tech Silicon Valley, Wall Street, the multinational corporations that want to rule us, they're on the Democrats' side. And they're going to do everything that they can to prevent us from passing legislation that would hold these big tech companies accountable in the way that we should.
Certainly the first step is for all of us to know what's going on, to understand the industry, to understand what these companies are doing. I would suggest that their business practices are, you know, the rest of the iceberg. What we know about is the tip, but the surveillance they conduct on us, how they sell our data, how they use that data to manipulate us, that's all beneath the surface. And so that book by the Harvard Marxist professor, First Time for Everything, you're being recommended reading from a Harvard Marxist professor on a heritage stage, is a good place to start. I want to switch gears to talk about some of the actions of your friends up on the Hill.
I've got 2 of them.
I mean the way you might go to the floor and say, my friend on the other side of the aisle. The way that they're spending money. Last week, the House passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill that's going to cost over $1 trillion. Next week, they've promised to pass a reconciliation package that's going to cost $2 trillion. I want to say this to the audience really fast. You need to try to wrap your head around what $1 trillion is. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 11 days ago was Halloween. 11 days from now, it'll be Thanksgiving, right? 11 days comes and goes in the course of our lives, no problem. You can probably remember what you had for breakfast 11 days ago. That's 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years. It's 32,000 years. That's the difference between 1 million and 1 trillion. So when we're going to talk about this $1 trillion spending bill, just try to tune into that for a second. 32,000 years in seconds. My question for you, sir, is 4 days after that, we realize that inflation is at a 30-year high. Are they aware of the immoral consequences of their spending? What is it like when they are pushing through this spending? And the reason I'm asking is I want to know how we stop them.
Yeah, I do too, and it's that's why all of you are here. You're on the front lines of helping us stop the radical socialist agenda of the other side. Now, what the worst part of all this, the sickening part for me, was Friday night at about midnight. It was a group of 12 Republicans who ended up giving the Democrats this win with a fake infrastructure deal that's a lot more Green New Deal than it is infrastructure. It's sickening, right? To think that we had them on the ropes. We had a great election in Virginia last Tuesday. The Democrats were on the ropes, and the 12 Republicans helped the radical Democrats pass a fake infrastructure bill. And I have another question, Tommy. How do these Republicans in the Senate who talk about protecting the filibuster all the time, they'll go at lengths to fight and protect the filibuster. Why don't they ever use it when it actually matters? Like when it's like blocking the radical Biden agenda and stopping this infrastructure bill from ever passing out of the Senate. I mean, how do the Republican senators who passed cloture on the fake infrastructure bill that allowed it to go to the House, where 12 Republicans joined the Democrats minus the squad? The Democrats didn't have the votes, but then they made this sweetheart deal between the socialist and there's no such thing as a moderate Democrat. This isn't my grandpa's Democrat Party anymore. There's no such thing as a moderate Democrat, but the more traditional Democrats made a sweetheart deal with the socialist Democrats late on Friday, that if they pass the infrastructure bill, then they're all going to fall in line and pass the socialist reconciliation bill that's going to cost about $4 trillion more on top of the $1.2 trillion that they passed last week. So how do we stop it at this point? I mean, Friday night was a sucker punch for a lot of us when they finally achieved something that they had 4 or 5 false starts trying to get done before. The only thing that we can do at this point is just go out and tell the truth about what's in the bill. The Democrats didn't tell the truth about what was in the fake infrastructure bill, but Republican Study Committee and Heritage Foundation, Heritage Action, all of you, we need to go out and let people know how radical this bill is and how much it will transform America overnight if it passes. I'm talking about the reconciliation bill. The fake infrastructure bill already passed. Biden's going to sign it on Monday, and it's going to do a lot of damage to your gas prices are going to go up because of it. It's going to do a lot of damage to the economy with just that, but another $4 trillion on top of it. And then you start peeling back layers of the onion and seeing what it will do. It will literally shut down faith-based daycares in this country. If it doesn't put your daycare out of business, it's going to cost you $13,000 more per year to send your kid to daycare over what it did last year. I could go on and on and on about provisions that are in the bill like that are dangerous, from amnesty provisions to public funding of abortion. What this bill will spend $4 trillion on will turn America into a socialist country. We can't allow that to happen. So I hope these Republican senators who bent over backwards before on the infrastructure bill, even though they're using reconciliation, which means they only need 50 senators in the Senate to pass it after it passes out of the House. I hope they come to their senses and do everything they can to help the conservatives in the House defeat it.
I agree. And we're going to do everything we can at Heritage and at Heritage Action to stop that as well. We already are, you know that. One of the most stinging rebukes you can get as a kid is that actions speak louder than words, right? We all remember that lesson from when we were kids. We promise we won't do it again. We didn't mean that. And then the rebuke comes, actions speak a lot louder than words. All of your colleagues, to a person, they pay lip service to the idea that the deficit is out of control and the national debt is out of control and that spending is too high. But when they turn around and they cast that vote, that's the action that is speaking a lot louder than their words. That's part of what we do at Heritage, and it's part of what especially they do at Heritage Action, is pointing out what those actions actually mean in Congress. You mentioned one of the most dangerous parts of the reconciliation bill is amnesty. What strikes me is that a lot of the crises that are ongoing in this country are fueled by the Biden administration. So I'm thinking of inflation that is fueled by higher spending and some of the employment policy that came along with COVID. The crisis at the border is fueled by the lack of enforcement of our immigration laws, but it's also fueled by the promise of amnesty. And today, the icing on the cake, the promise of potentially $450,000 to those that are caught on the border. Of course, the borders are flooded and under pressure. I'm not hearing the Democrats necessarily cheerlead for this amnesty provision, but it's in there. This is clearly part of their agenda. I want you to talk for a minute about stopping that, the damage that it can do, and then specifically the $450,000 payments that are on the table for those that were arrested on the border by the Trump administration.
Yeah, it's a game of who wants to be a millionaire, but only illegals get to play the game, right? They're the only ones that get to apply. And it's all paid for on the backs of hardworking American families. I've been to the border a number of times with my colleagues, actually visited recently with President Trump after he was out of office to go and highlight how intentional all of this is on the part of the Biden administration and the Democrats. That's something to remember. I mean, this is intentional on their part. It's not an accident. It's not an accident that over a million illegals have come over the border since Joe Biden became president, because he reversed the very effective Remain in Mexico policies that President Trump enacted, reinstituted the catch and release policies that were so disastrous under Obama that we've returned back to. And then he stopped construction of the border wall. It was his first act as president when Joe Biden was sworn into office, signing an executive order to block further construction of the border wall. So if that's all a bad recipe in and of itself, but on top of that, then you're Democrats are writing bills with amnesty provisions, which just invites millions more to come, and then the promise of $450,000 for those who were separated at the border when their loved one or their family member was arrested for breaking the law, right? I mean, this is this is wild when you think about it, but what you always have to remember is that this is entirely intentional on their part. All of their policies are intentional. It's all designed to disrupt and change America from inside out. So what can we do about it? I will bet my Starbucks card, and if you know me, there's a lot of money on my Starbucks card. I will bet my Starbucks card before all of you today in Orlando, Florida, on Veterans Day 2021, that we will win back the House majority in 2022.
You're here.
Okay? And when we do, we will be done, although I'm predicting this will happen even before then. Nancy Pelosi will retire and she'll be sent back to San Francisco and never be in leadership of our country again. But that's a year away. Look at the damage that these Democrats have done in 1 year. Imagine what they're going to do in 2. But when we get the majority back, we will have the gavels. Jim Jordan will be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. That's a big deal, right? So he'll have the committee with jurisdiction of immigration laws, and the committee where we can hold these Democrats accountable in a big way. And if we dare not repeat the mistakes that we made in another era, in my first 2 years in Congress, and we actually do what we say we're going to do, when we get the majority back, we'll hold these guys accountable for everything that they've done wrong to this country, and we'll try to untangle this web of many things that they've done to change. But I'm like all of you, I'm depressed by the damage that they've done in 1 year, and I'm worried about the damage they're going to do in another.
From your lips to God's ears. You know, we've got a long slog to get there, but you're right, they're doing a lot of damage. I mentioned the crisis on the border. I mentioned the inflationary crisis. It's Veterans Day, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about what happened in Afghanistan and the way that this administration abandoned our service members, and what that means to you, what that means to you as a member of Congress, and you as a member of our armed forces.
Well, I thank you. I served in Afghanistan in 2014 and 15, just prior to running for Congress in 2016. And then for 4 years, I served with President Trump, who, during that entire period of time, he campaigned on getting us out of Afghanistan and put us on a path, I believe, that would have ended the war in Afghanistan, but it would have looked a lot different than what it did in the irresponsible way that Joe Biden performed the withdrawal. In fact, I spoke with President Trump about this a couple of weeks ago, and all through I serve on the Armed Services Committee in the House, so I could tell you, I can stand before all of you right now and tell you that what happened in Afghanistan a few months ago would not have happened on Donald Trump's watch. It just wouldn't have happened. It's just a fact. I mean, President Trump was putting us on a path to withdraw Americans first, to withdraw our military equipment rather than leave $85 billion of equipment behind, falling into the hands of the Taliban and worse, now into the hands of ISIS, likely Iran and other adversaries who we could potentially face down the road. Everything from weapons and ammunition to ground-wheeled vehicles, which is what I was involved with when I was serving in Afghanistan, on the front and back end of turning this equipment over to the Afghan police and the Afghan army, but also unbelievably other things like night vision goggles, which gives us a very strategic advantage when we're fighting against terrorists in the hills, when we have night vision goggles and they don't, right? Now we left all of them behind, the Taliban and other groups have them. And then on top of that, get this, they left biometric devices with the biometrics of the Afghans and the allies who fought on our side when we were in Afghanistan. They left them behind. The Taliban got a hold of them. So think about that. So we're leaving the country. We leave a lot of our allies behind. Some people get on planes. We don't even know who they are. We flew We flew thousands of Afghans out 110,000 Afghans out of the country. We don't even know who they are because there was no vetting process because of the haphazard way that they retreated. And then we leave the biometrics devices telling our enemy who their enemies are, the people who are left behind. So maybe the greatest example of irresponsible leadership that I've seen in my lifetime, right? Leadership matters, elections matter, leadership matters. And in this case, we have an incompetent leader who's asleep at the wheel. To this point, nobody has been held accountable for it. Like literally nobody has been held accountable for the mess in Afghanistan. So when we get the majority back, I promise you as a senior member of the Armed Services Committee, we will hold people accountable who haven't been held accountable before. But once again, we're still another year away before that will happen.
Earlier in our discussion, we did a panel called The War on Wokeism. And we had Dakota Wood, who's a Marine, and we drew a distinction between the top brass and the rank and file in the military. And it strikes me that what's happening here is a double standard for the president and for the generals and admirals that are responsible for what happened in Afghanistan, and the soldiers that did everything right and deserve our thanks and gratitude. And they're getting it today. Hopefully, I think there's a lot of gratitude and reverence for their service in this room. But there's a different standard. All of us want to have that chance to hold them accountable, like you did when you had, who was it, the Admiral of the Navy in front of you testifying in Congress. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, well, it's one of many examples. I mean, the admiral, the top ranking admiral and the CNO, the top ranking admiral in the United States Navy, appeared before the Armed Services Committee. And when I served in the 8-9 years in the Navy Reserves, I got the monthly email from the admiral with the admiral's recommended reading list. Pretty innocent. I mean, I'll admit that I didn't read hardly any of them, but it was usually a list of books about leadership, about military history, about the geopolitical threats that we face. Important books that educate our sailors about what we face as a nation, how we can be better prepared as leaders, right? History, leadership, whatnot. Well, now we're in a new era. I mean, the switch was flipped on January 20th when Joe Biden became president. The wokeness there was always an element of it there, but in many ways, President Trump kept it at bay, and when Joe Biden became president, the switch was flipped. And almost immediately, Admiral Gilday's reading list went out, and it included a book on the reading list by Ibram X. Kendi. You guys have all have heard of him, titled "How to Be an Anti-Racist." In fact, it's the most racist book that you'll ever read in your life. And I couldn't help myself. I had to ask Admiral Gilday when it was my turn to ask questions on the Armed Services Committee how that was productive. How is it productive to tell sailors who are serving the United States Navy that America is inherently evil and racist? Because that's what the book says. How is it productive to tell the next generation of young men and women who might raise their right hand like I did that America is evil and racist and potentially not worth fighting and dying for? I don't know how that's sustainable as a country when we're teaching that in this critical race theory and anti-Americanism in our schools and telling our sailors of all ranks to read books on this subject. I don't know how that's sustainable. And Admiral Gilday is the highest ranking admiral in the Navy. I'm a lieutenant in the United States Navy. So he didn't appreciate that a lieutenant was asking the admiral questions about his reading list, and how dare you put a book like that on the list. And it got a little heated, and we had a little bit of a back and forth. And then a couple months later, we had, as I mentioned, that President Trump astutely pointed out, I had a back and forth with General Milley as well on the same topic. If these guys are so focused on ridding extremism from the ranks and telling sailors to read books that preach to them that they are racist, that the United States Navy is inherently racist, that America is racist. If we spend all of our time focused on that, then we're obviously not focused on how we safely withdraw from Afghanistan. We're obviously not focused on how we match up with the greatest adversary that we face in America today, both economically and militarily, in China. We're not focused on that. We're focused on the social reengineering of our military as a social experiment for the left to change our military in a significant way, to take away the fighting spirit of our military. So these are fights that we're having on our side with the left on the committees, and I can't wait until we're in the majority when we can fight these battles a little bit harder.
Well, one of the things I said during our Wokeism panel was that Wokeism is not built to actually do battle. It's built to intimidate us off the battlefield. So thank you, sir, for refusing to remain silent, for not being afraid that some lefty on Twitter would call you a racist or a xenophobe, but for holding these individuals accountable. I want to end with this question. One of the reasons I'm so proud to work at the Heritage Foundation is our relationship with the Republican Study Committee and all the things the Study Committee has accomplished. In large part, that's thanks to this guy right here, Dr. Ed Fulner, who is, of course, a Heritage founder, a former Heritage president, and integral in the founding of the Study Committee. You have rekindled that relationship, reinvigorated it, and you've taught a lot of your colleagues about it, which I personally and my colleagues at Heritage are very grateful for. We are the great beneficiaries of it, but in my opinion, the country and the Congress are great beneficiaries of it as well. I wanted to publicly say thank you for that and give you a chance to comment on it.
Well, thank you very much. It's the greatest honor that I've had in Congress so far is to chair the Republican Study Committee. Ed Fulner was 11 years old when he founded the Republican Study Committee 48 years ago. It was founded at the same time that the Heritage Foundation was founded, and since has had an alliance, a marriage that's been very important. That, I suppose, has ebbed and flowed over those decades, but today it's as important as ever. When I became the chairman, I wanted to rebuild Republican Study Committee to match the unique moment that we're in, because I believe that we're in a new moment in the conservative movement. And a lot of people are calling it different things, but it's a new chapter in our movement. And much of it is so because President Trump taught us a lot of lessons over 4 years that we would be wise to heed. And at Republican Study Committee, we've been unpacking those lessons that we learned over 4 years. Most of us having served during that same time that President Trump was in office. How to fight back against the left. How do we broaden our Republican coalition to bring in the Trump voters who weren't always Republicans? How do we keep them in the Republican Party permanently rather than seeing working class, blue collar voters drift back to the Democrat Party over time? President Trump brought them to our side. How do we cement them there? What does our agenda look like that's a winning agenda, not just to win back the majority, but to win back the White House in 2024? And when we do win back the majority, what are we going to do from day one? What are the issues that we're going to focus on? So as the new chairman of the Republican Study Committee, we've been focused on that. We've had almost every leader in the Republican Party who might or might not run for president in 2024 come and speak to us. And we've had many thought leaders as well come and talk to us about what this new moment looks like, what we should be focused on. And here's what I believe, and I believe the Heritage Foundation understands this as well as anybody. If we can be both the conservative movement and the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan and of Donald Trump, we're going to be the party in control for a long time to come. And what do I mean by that? The traditional three-legged stool of the conservative movement that Ed Fulner built Republican Study Committee around and the conservative movement was built around, in a strong national defense and fiscal responsibility and the pro-life, pro-family party, and marry that with many of the, some might say, more populist issues of the Trump era. By the way, I don't like that word because I think many of the so-called populist issues are our issues as conservatives, right? They're traditional. They are rooted in many of the traditional values that we hold, but President Trump understood how to package them better in a way to win over voters who weren't in our fold before. What I'm talking about what you guys have been talking about. Election integrity has to be at the top of our list. Cracking down on big tech and holding them accountable. I believe the First Amendment and free speech is an issue that Republicans usually set aside. It's kind of a secondary issue, but has ever been more important than it is right now to protect our free speech. Tackling the greatest threat that we face in China, and a major focus, a whole of government approach and focus on confronting the China threat. So these are issues that we're wrapping into what used to be our platform for a long time and bringing new issues to our platform. And I think it's why it's built Republican Study Committee back up into the stature that Ed Follner imagined that it would be decades ago. And we're having a big impact. We're focused on policy, on building the policy agenda, and holding Republican leadership accountable for enacting those, advancing those policies when we get the agenda back. And that's why Republican Study Committee is as important as it's ever been.
You've done a tremendous job. Your group has fight. You've got your priorities correct. You've got some swagger. You're going to start notching victories. We're so proud to call you a partner. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman Jim Banks.
Thank you.